My name is Michael Goldberg, and I'm the executive director of our Veale Institute for Entrepreneurship, and I'm also a professor at the Weatherhead School of Management. When I'm in my office, it got a little chilly today in my office, so I'm wearing my winter jacket. And it's great to have everybody here today for our Case Western Reserve University Entrepreneurship Alumni Speaker Series featuring Matthew Iorio. It's great to have you. All of our sessions are moderated by students, and I'm thrilled that Jamila McKenzie volunteered to moderate today. She's sitting on campus at the Career Services, so she's got our sweet logo in the background. And Jamila's going to run the show, and which is awesome for me because I can just enjoy things. For those that are new to our format, if you're on Zoom, just put, you can either sort of raise your virtual hand or real hand, or just put a question that you want to let Jamila know that you want a question in the chat, and she can call on you to ask directly, or she can ask it for you. If you're watching on LinkedIn Live, it's great to have you. Just put a question for Matthew in the comment bar, and Doug DiGirolamo and I will be sort of monitoring that, and we can make sure that we feed in the questions. So with that, let me turn it over to Jamila. And Matthew, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you for this opportunity to moderate as well. So to everyone who's new, my name is Jamila McKenzie, and I'm a senior here at Case studying biomedical engineering. I have minors in mechanical design and manufacturing, along with business management, so there are quite a few areas of overlapping interests with our speaker for today. And I encourage you to take advantage of this, even as a virtual platform, it's still a networking opportunity. So feel free to paste in your LinkedIn link if you would like to network. And with that, I'd like to introduce Matt Iorio, who graduated from Case with a biomedical engineering degree in 2008 as his undergrad degree, and then went on to pursue a master's in BME, also at Case. And then he earned an MBA at Cleveland State, and now he's working at Neuros, which is a neuromodulation company. And he's a manager of clinical affairs and data analytics. And he's leading clinical trials for nerve blocking technology, which is pretty cutting edge. So it is awesome to have you here, Matt.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. So as Jamila said, I am the manager of clinical affairs and data analytics at Neuros Medical. I figured I'd give everybody a little bit of a background on what the company is and a little bit about the technology, and then just open it up for questions and kind of see where it goes. So let me share my screen. Neuros Medical, we're a clinical stage neuromodulation company pioneering innovative nerve treatment therapies to help patients with chronic pain. So we have the high frequency nerve block system, as Jamila had mentioned, called the Altia system, where it's a novel neuromodulation technology. And for those patients that have not had good results using pain medications or opiates or other therapies, it can be a potential alternative for them. For anybody that has chronic pain, as you know, is a significant market opportunity, especially for those that we're studying now. The need is large and urgent for these patients to help provide additional therapies for those that have chronic pain. And currently we're in our IDE pivotal study, and we're enrolling. We're hoping to have enrollment potentially by the end of Q3 of next year. So to talk a little bit more about the Altia system, this is what it looks like. Again, this is an investigational device only at this point, so only being used in this clinical trial. You have various components that are implanted, such as the IPG in the middle of the screen, which is rechargeable. There is a cuff electrode that attaches to that implanted IPG. The IPG is similar to a pacemaker of sorts, and the electrode travels and it wraps around the actual nerve that we're looking to use the nerve block on. Patients can also use their patient controller to communicate wirelessly through the skin to turn the device on and off and use that. And similarly with the battery charger is the same thing, where the charger, once the patients need to charge the device with that black charging paddle, can place that over the skin and then allow them to do a charging session. And then when they ever are in the clinic, the programming wand is used by our field staff at this point to work with them during programming of the device for certain visits. So the current pathway of Neuros to this point is we had developed, obviously, the device in the research phase on the bench side. So for everybody that is a Case Western current or alum, this technology was developed by doctors Kevin Kilgore and Niloy Badra that are affiliated with the Cleveland Functional Electrical Stimulation and work out of Metro Health. They had developed that and tested high frequency nerve block on the bench side of testing, as well as doing some animal studies. And then it moved into first in man and the pilot IDE study. And those results for the pilot study allowed us to move on and do a larger scale clinical trial, which we are currently in, where we're looking at about 180 patients to have implanted with the trial. This IDE stage allows us then, once completed, to apply for PMA or pre-market approval with the FDA. And in these class 3 devices, this happens to be the most highly regulated area from the FDA in terms of, obviously in terms of regulation and data and making sure that the device is safe and effective. And our IDE proposed indication is listed there for those patients that have intractable lower limb pain, that have developed at least one adequate response to some of the eligibility criteria that are listed there for a nerve blockade. So with that, I am open to taking questions and kind of go into a little bit more of the pathway and just any questions anybody may have. So.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction, Matt.
You're welcome.
And kind of before we even delve into that, can you just share how you, as a biomedical engineer, then decided to get an MBA and then landed in clinical affairs? That's not really a typical path. So how did you find yourself here?
Yeah, that's a good path, isn't it? So originally, I started at Case, actually, to go way back, I started as a mechanical engineer first, and decided I really wanted to have more of a medical focus. That really resonated with me. Then through undergrad, I really realized that neural engineering and the potential to help people with pain, in that case, was really appealing to me. Really what motivated that for me personally was my mom has suffered from chronic pain for 20, 30 years. So I was always looking for ways to potentially help her even and help people like her that have chronic pain. So my initial thought was to, after I graduated, was to go on and get work in grad school and work in clinical research, and work in the academic side of research, I should say. So I was pursuing a master's degree, was on the PhD track, and really kind of, though, fell more in love with the idea of commercializing technology, kind of more on the industry side. And from there, I really tried to understand what skill sets, what tools I needed to have in the toolbox to kind of make that leap. So I looked at combining it with an MBA. So about 2012, I graduated from Case again. And then I went on, like you mentioned, to go to Cleveland State and pursue my MBA in marketing. Right around the time, actually, that I was done pursuing the MBA, or getting close to finishing, I had been in touch with John Snyder, actually, at the time, who was our CEO at the time and founder. And I just really resonated with the technology and the company, and it really was something that was exciting to me. The idea of being able to help a startup in Northeast Ohio doing really groundbreaking work was really exciting for me. So when I got in, and I was fortunate enough to start to work in the R&D department at Neuros as an intern, as the days kind of went on and I got more and more experience, there was a need that I could fill on the engineering side, kind of analyzing data and things like that. And I was able, luckily enough, to be hired on full time. As the company expanded, there was a need for what I was focusing on at the time, and it actually got taken up by clinical affairs. So a lot of the data, taking a look at the data. And so I just, one of the things that I've noticed, and one of the things that's been really good for me, is just being given the opportunity and kind of taking advantage of it. So I went from R&D into clinical affairs, and here I am. So that's kind of how it fit. And the one thing that I've talked to a lot of people also in clinical research that have gotten into it, I've asked them, how did you actually get into it? And they're like, we kind of stumbled into it. is kind of how it happened. That's exactly how it happened to me. I was basically right down the hall, and I kind of got stumbled, I got kind of absorbed into it, and it's been a really great decision and transition for me.
Awesome. It seems like even when your path isn't what you necessarily thought it would be, if you allow your interests and your passions to really guide where you go, then it can end even better than you may have planned for.
Totally. Yeah. I couldn't agree with that more. It's just, what I've found is, just putting your hand up and taking the opportunities that are given to you and be passionate and focused. And this was certainly not the path I had envisioned when I started, but it's been a really great path for me and a really great fit, because as an engineer, I still like to be close to the technology, and I still am, but I'm a little bit more out in front, and being part of the clinical team has allowed me to do that.
I see a few questions from the audience, but before I open it up, I did want to touch on the fact that you said that your mom suffered chronic pain. So there's some empathy from your experience. What role would you say empathy has played in the ongoing design process or the development process for such a product?
Yeah, I mentioning it for my mom with chronic pain, being in a company like this, for me, it's personal at that point, which I think really helps drive passion and desire to really do, to really help these patients. And I think the great thing about working at Neuros Medical is that we're very patient-centric, and empathy is at the core of everything we do. We also have, stakeholders with us as we develop this product and go through clinical trials, such as obviously the FDA and the institutional review boards that are at every local center. And their number one priority is obviously safety first of subjects and providing a good patient experience, as well as effectiveness. So we have to be able, and we, certainly partner strongly with them to make sure that we, are always looking at and designing, going through the trial and making sure that the patient experience is number one priority. And so having empathy for these patients and seeing, what they've gone through really helps. And in terms of the design process, we do take feedback from patients, although the design itself is locked as this phase, right? But they provide feedback that could potentially be used later on in later studies or later developments too. So having that, that interaction as well kind of plays off of that empathy.
Awesome. I believe Aiden had his hand raised. Aiden, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, I was curious so this is obviously for a sizable nerve. How do you block, or are you able to just block the pain signals without impacting the motor, the sensory aspects of that are also going down that nerve?
So Aiden, that's a really, really good question. So some of the specifics, obviously, because we're in an IDE study, I can't really get fully into it. But, the idea is that at least for blocking those pain signals, again, Doctors Kilgore and Badra had studied that and seen that particular combinations of frequency and amplitude can actually block or inhibit those signals traveling upstream to the brain by essentially over depolarizing previous sodium ion channels, so that sodium ion channels upstream towards the brain would not be able to get activated. To answer your question a little bit more, we know that level. Is there a possibility that you could potentially block other movements? It's possible, as the science isn't 100% totally understandable at that level, but yeah.
Yeah, I've heard there's issues with individuals with stroke where they have too much descending command. So it'd be interesting to apply this in those cases where they're basically their hand is just locked in a position. So maybe impacting those motor channels would help relieve that.
Right.
It looks like Jackie has a follow-up question.
Sure.
Yeah, I do. So I am curious, kind of as a follow-up to that question from Aiden, if you all have been able to do any research on how traditional pain treatment interacts with this new treatment that you're developing. So like opiates or any other pain medications, and then maybe also ability for use during PT.
Can you repeat that second part again, Jackie?
Yeah, so I'm curious if if you all have been able to do any research on the interaction between what you're developing and traditional pain treatment. So whether that be medications, opiates, other strategies there, or use during physical therapy sessions.
Right. So, so for this clinical trial in particular, we're looking more at the efficacy of these particular treatment sessions. And you take a look at the pilot study data as well. One of the main criteria that we looked at that point was reduction in the use of pain medication, which the published information did show that there was a significant decrease in pain medication. But in this particular trial, it's more focused on the actual safety and the efficacy of this device, not necessarily on the interactions per se. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, with such a large challenge as chronic pain, it's really to have a narrowed scope to make sure that you can actually deliver on that.
Right.
I see that Colin had a question. Colin, would you like to unmute?
Hi, Colin.
Hi. You know, there's a lot of myth about working with the FDA. And as a former government employee, I've always felt that reaching out is better than not reaching out. But I think the myth of the agony of working with the FDA keeps people from working. How have you found working with the FDA?
We've, you know, Colin, it's been a really good relationship. Neuros has always been a company that has been very forward in communicating and really kind of tried to keep that open dialogue. It's actually been a very positive thing as we've kind of gone along the trial and to show them what we're doing and our progress. And also as you go through studies like this, there are obviously regularly scheduled check-ins you have to do. But one of the things I think that we preach at Neuros too that's really been there is that level of constant communication and collaboration. And it's especially important when we're talking to the regulatory agents like them and IRB to make sure that we're all on the same page. And really from my experience, Colin, it's really been nothing but positive. Knowing how to engage and really being transparent has really been really great for us. And I think working with them.
You know, I think when people, because it sounds, you know, from the way you're speaking that, you know, your first priority is patient care. And of course, the FDA is there for the patients and to protect the subjects and the patients. They're not obsessed with your profitability. So I think
exactly.
The indirect thing is that by focusing on the patient, it does actually help with your business concept. The second question I had is that I am fascinated by people that go get an MBA after whatever degree they get. What was the most valuable course you took during your MBA that helps you today in your business role?
That's a really great question, Colin. And here's my thing with that. I don't know that I have necessarily a course in mind, but I want to talk a little bit more about the differences in the programs. And I know, Colin, you and I talked a lot about this when I was a grad student. The MBA, I think in general, really opened me up in a couple areas. One, I just felt like a better understanding of how businesses work and team dynamics and understanding those things. Number two, I think the MBA also really helped me with dealing more with, you know, situations where you may not have all the answers, having to kind of make tough decisions in an area where maybe you don't have all the answers. As engineers, we like to define everything very concretely in our assumptions and like to know everything. But the one thing that the MBA really taught me, I think, is that you're not going to know everything. And I think that was really a big payoff for me. It kind of helped me see the world differently. And I think that really helped to make the next step.
Yeah, I think you see it from a different lens.
Totally.
Engineers are happy to compute the wrong answer to 3 significant digits and the business person really sees beyond that. So yeah,
Totally.
good, excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome, Colin. Of course.
Ayush, I saw that you had a question. Do you still want to ask it, or do you feel that it was already covered?
I guess my main question was, did you find could you just elaborate if you did it before, after graduating or after some work experience?
About the MBA in particular?
Yeah, he was asking if there
MBA.
was space between when you graduated with your master's and when you pursued your MBA.
Yeah, there was a little bit of time. I graduated in 2012 in the spring with my master's, and then went into the spring of the next year to start the MBA. In between, I did a little bit of work in the tech transfer office for a very short period of time, and then did some various, jobs here and there before the MBA started. I think I spent some time at an open innovation firm that was in Cleveland at the time. So just trying to get more experience around the commercialization pathway.
Okay, thank you. And did you feel that your MBA changed your perspective on what you worked on before you started your MBA?
Yeah, I think the MBA was great in the sense, like I had just mentioned to Colin, is that it really opened my eyes up to how businesses work and really how the world works. It kind of gave me, at least from my point of view, it kind of gave me more of a framework to kind of look at things a little bit differently. I had been in engineering for a long time, and it was fantastic, and I use those skills, every day. But to be able to kind of open my mind up to other things like that on the business side is certainly really helpful, at least for me. So
Awesome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Susan, I believe you have a question. Would you like to unmute and ask?
Yes, I was wondering, when you say it is for pain relief, if it might be applicable to patients who are having total knee replacement, because one thing, I'm a nurse, and we've observed in the last 5 years is there's a great fear among the older generation, meaning the people 55 and older that are having knee replacements, that they, put off the surgery because they know the pain is excruciating and they're going to be on very heavy opioids for at least 2 to 3 weeks, and they're worried about getting addicted. And I'm thinking, well, I remember one of the nurses recommending TENS to a patient, and that patient at 2 weeks after surgery had said that really seemed to help, and maybe this device could help the total knee replacements. And, there are over 200,000 of those in the United States each year. So I was wondering if they thought it might be in a next generation, device applicable to them.
Yes, that's a really good question, Susan. So as you know, for our clinical trial currently, we're looking obviously at safety and effectiveness for amputees currently, unilateral. We are looking into other potential indications as potentially a next gen. It's possible that could be one of them at this point, but there's still more discussion on that. And so it certainly could be possible.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
My co-ops were in the medical device space, and I was able to co-op in the knee department for 1 semester. So I love hearing about knee devices, and that I do understand that pain associated with those procedures is definitely something to consider and something that can push people away from getting surgeries that they otherwise need. So it's awesome that there are increasing opportunities to mitigate that pain.
Right.
And I see that Max has a question as well. Max, would you like to unmute?
Yeah, hello.
Hi, Max.
Hey, I just had a quick question. I'm a 4th year biomedical engineering student as well. So I was wondering, so going into the field, I'd like to intern or work with a larger company at first because the training is more, I think, complete and whatnot, just from what I've heard and such. But obviously, Neuros isn't as big as a Medtronic, I would assume, right? So
Right.
How did you see the training differ when you were an intern there? And I guess, how complete did you see it? How comprehensive was it? Do you feel like you learned a lot? And was that a good path? Like how do you see like small medical device companies, the advantages there versus large medical device companies?
Right. That's a really good question, Max. So I have not had direct experience in larger medical device company. I've had former students that I went to school with that have worked in bigger med device companies. I've had colleagues at Neuros work at bigger med device companies. The message that I hear typically is that really obviously with startup companies, smaller companies, you have to wear many different hats. So with more people, the idea is that you may have your role to be more defined within a certain area or a certain department within a department in a larger med device company, for instance. Whereas at a company like Neuros, because it's smaller, what I happen to love about it is that you're able to get more exposure to different things. So really when I started at Neuros, the training was good, but a lot of the times as well, and the training has obviously increased as we've, grown and expanded. But, it's something too that where we all are obviously continuing to be patient focused on the trial and really kind of updating and doing continuous improvement, continuous training as we move along. Where our main focus for the company is on that particular trial. So I would say really the difference between the two types of companies and types of training is, you can have really detailed levels of training, which we do at Neuros, very comprehensive in various areas. And we have a really strong mindset about really understanding cross-functional collaboration in departments and kind of how it all works together. It's one of the things I really love about the company too, is how every department kind of works together and you're intertwined, which that might not be the same at a larger company depending on your experience. So really, I would say ultimately that different companies will approach it differently, whether you're small, medium, or a larger size company. I think it really depends on the company culture and the philosophy.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Awesome. For this stage, in the clinical trials, as you already mentioned, the device is already locked in. But
Right.
What learnings from your experiences so far do you feel would be most applicable to help ensure more successful device design if you were able to apply?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, so yeah, as you mentioned, I mean, for being in a clinical trial, the device is locked in at this point. One of the things that, obviously as you go through and you develop a device for class 3 use, right? So like this, you have to obviously meet certain milestones for that, right? So your device has to be tested on the bench. You have to have various mechanical, electrical, biocompatibility tests that are done. You then move it obviously into some kind of animal model, right? So everything preclinical work. And then getting it into patients is really the critical step. You learn so much about, things when you are working with patients. So, taking those and taking the learnings, I think, are really critical to potentially apply them to design maybe later on, right? You learn so much when you actually have the device, used by people, they provide feedback, those kinds of things. It's a totally different testing environment than it is when you're on the bench or when you're testing in animals, for instance. So looking at that and looking at those milestones, I think are really obviously critical for device design.
Awesome. Speaking of different environment, how have clinical trials been impacted by COVID?
Oh, so yeah, COVID. We know about that. Yeah, that's been the one thing, right? So that's kind of upset all of our daily lives as we move along. And one big thing that I think everybody has been, looking at where clinical trials are concerned are a vaccine for COVID. We're all anxiously awaiting for when's the vaccine going to come. And so as you can imagine, a lot of clinical sites and a lot of clinical sites and centers really are focusing and putting more effort into COVID-related vaccine trials, COVID-related therapeutic trials, those kinds of things. So a lot of resources are shifted there. That's one thing. Another item is, I think that you see, just like you see it when you walk into any public place now, depending on, what state you're in, the levels of PPE and the checking and that kind of thing, I think those have also changed, right? So more rigorous standards to make sure patients that come into any clinical site, for instance, undergo, additional testing and undergo additional kind of precautions, prior to any kind of procedure. That's definitely changed a lot since COVID. Another thing also that has really kind of been a big push, as I think we've all probably experienced now, is a lot of the virtual visits and Zoom calls. So the thought of, sponsors thinking about how they can incorporate telehealth more into studies as a way to make sure that patients are staying safe and that, they can still potentially get the information they need from visits. We've seen those adaptations take place in our trial also, that, more of a push on those kinds of ends too. So really where I would say, Jamila, more of the effort is really there's just across the board, there's much more effort on trying to find a vaccine and a therapeutic that works for COVID, but also making sure that people that come into clinics and come into clinical settings are properly screened, make sure they're wearing the right protective equipment, make sure that they're tested for COVID if they need to before a procedure, making sure that everybody's safe at that point. And also the push more to using and trying to incorporate telehealth into that. The FDA actually recently came out with a guidance on it about those ideas back in June, about, their thoughts on it and how sponsors can work to incorporate them in a mindful manner. And again, encouraging that open dialogue with them too. So.
Nice. I was curious if FDA regulations had changed in accordance with COVID or to adjust to COVID.
Yeah.
So it doesn't seem like there's been an entirely new, well, actually, can you speak to that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, they've come up with some things. One thing was the guidance that I mentioned back in June. They really, really kind of their suggestion on, thoughts on how do you incorporate telehealth into your studies and how do you go ahead and, essentially, account for subjects that may not come in when they should. It's a very personal time right now. So how to account for certain visits like that, how to communicate with the FDA and work with them to let them know, what's going on. So thinking about, different things about their suggestions on data analysis, so a lot of those things they've kind of put a guidance out, just again, suggestions, right, that are good ones that, we obviously take seriously as they know this is a major health, pandemic, obviously. So, and it affects everything, not only just our daily lives, but it affects how you go through and implement a clinical study.
Yeah. So how are there any COVID led changes that are likely to stay, would you say?
Yeah, kind of going back to what we talked about, I think that certainly a push more doing in kind of incorporating telehealth is one that I think will probably stay around, especially as we all know, doing virtual visits with our physicians now is becoming more and more commonplace. I think COVID has kind of accelerated that. So I think certainly sponsors will have to think about how to incorporate more telehealth. I certainly also think that a lot of the health testing and standards now that have been put in place by medical centers to make sure people coming into the clinic are COVID-free and tested and that they're safe. I think those will probably stay around as well, as we go along here, for sure. So I think those things are going to be ones that probably in our daily lives too are not probably going to go away, but I think they'll evolve as we kind of evolve with the situation.
I do like the point that some of the changes driven by COVID were kind of already on the way, and it just expedited how soon we saw it. Not all of it was tragic and sudden, so yeah, that's encouraging.
Yeah,
there are more questions, so Aiden, I'll let you unmute.
Again, I was curious what the next steps are for the device after the clinical trial. How do you really effectively spread into the target population?
So Aiden, that's another really good question. So that's one that strategically I can't really speak to at this point. But just know as you grow a technology, as you go through clinical trials, one of the ways to think about it also is that you are developing a target market. So as we're, in centers and trying to inform the public that may apply for this technology, that you're actually already developing that market for it. So the next step would be, after you've collected your data, then you put in your application to the FDA for pre-market approval. If that is approved, then marketing of the device can happen. And if planned correctly, then you've already had somewhat of a target market built in, and PIs and physicians and surgeons that are already comfortable with the technology. So you already have that kind of built in.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
And Colin, would you like to ask another question?
Yeah, I'm sort of curious on a practical level. Do the patients or the subjects in your case, do they have any apprehension about recharging the battery with the pad? I mean, do they have a disbelief that this is really going to work because they probably want to see something plug in? And I was also curious, how long does the implant surgery take? I mean, I'm assuming this is not outpatient.
Yeah. So to your point about charging the device, that's not something that I'm necessarily aware of, Colin. We do a lot of our patients will obviously trained on how to use the device and thoroughly trained over and over again on how to use that. Typically, the surgery is anywhere it can go near or a little bit past 90 minutes typically for it, and depending on subjects, it kind of depends on the anatomy and that for how long that would go.
The reason I asked about the charging is that sometimes things that seem challenging to somebody who's healthy, I think when you're in pain and chronic pain for a long period of time, maybe they just say, look, I'll do anything, and the barriers that might exist to somebody like myself who would think about that kind of thing just don't exist. So it's kind of going back to what Jamila was saying about empathy, being able to really put yourself in the place of the patient, not to feel sorry, but to understand, I think really helps in the device design process.
I totally agree with you, Colin. You make a really great point. And again, I know I've said it more than once, but that's one of the strengths that's what I've loved about working for Neuros, is taking that feedback and understanding what they need and really kind of using that as part of a design consideration for future generations of the device. Couldn't agree more with that.
Awesome. And it looks like Aiden was saying also wireless charging of phones has become pretty common. Mm-hmm. So it may help.
Yep.
Okay. So I guess, how would you say your experience in the engineering world and the business world have complemented each other in the space that you're operating?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think obviously your engineering degree gives you that level of analytical skill, and it gives you that ability to look at things in very fine detail and being very detail oriented, which you need to be in these running clinical trials and anything, right? So being able to really kind of be very detail oriented is really great. I think we get engineering degrees and we get excited about the degree and what it's in and that kind of thing. But I think the most important thing is that when you get an engineering degree, it really says that you have a certain ability to solve problems in a particular way. You have a very specific analytical skill set, whether you're mechanical, whether you're biomedical, whether you're chemical, it doesn't matter. Everybody has that ability to be very analytical with your thinking, which is awesome. The business degree, like I had mentioned before, I think it really just opened my mind up to how do you handle ambiguity and how do you work within organizations to work together, team dynamics. How do you really kind of work with people that may have, different views on things to come together for that common goal? And so I really think the MBA really helped me at least take the next step to being more able to handle those kinds of situations and being able to be more of an independent thinker and work well with our company to kind of help achieve that, continue to move forward and help with that common goal to help these patients that are in the trial.
Awesome. And I think this session alone speaks to the versatility of an engineering degree, especially one from Case.
Yeah,
so
and
awesome.
I would add to that too, Jamil. It's really good. I think, one important thing that I could kind of pass on to, the students that, are thinking about what career it is whatever career it is that you want to go to, is really just, strive, have a passion for excellence, and raise your hand, ask the questions, get involved, be passionate, and do the best you can do. And the opportunities will be there. It's been an interesting road for sure. I wasn't really thinking I was going to be in the middle of clinical research, right? But it turned out to be a really great fit for me. So continuing to have that passion, that striving for excellence, and that passion to do more and do better and grow is really going to take you a long way.
Awesome. Let's see. Oh yeah, Colin added, it is all about networking too.
Yes.
So it's awesome that we're able to apply some of those tips that you're giving us right now. There's
yes.
a bit of hand raising and engagement and networking.
Yes. Yeah. No, Colin is right with that. Colin was instrumental in helping me and networking with him during my decision-making process. Yeah, network. Talk to people and really kind of open those doors up is a big deal. And find your passion and go after it. It's really important.
If you don't mind me saying, I think one of the things that I think you did right was that you were networking to truly understand the market and to understand, what relationships. I don't think it was about finding a job. I think it was about, good networking where people help you, I believe. And I think that was your experience.
Yeah.
Is that sometimes people don't want to network because they say, well, what if they don't answer? You're not going to know if you don't ask. But I think you did a great job in saying, I just really need to understand if this is the direction I want to go.
Yeah. No, Colin, again, you were instrumental with that, and you kind of really helped show me that also, that networking with a purpose, right? And understanding building relationships is really critical in doing that, and kind of just finding your way and seeing what fits and what doesn't fit and how you can impact, a particular company or, wherever you may land. So.
Awesome. We only have time for one or two more questions, but Ronald, would you like to ask your question? Unmute and ask.
Sure. What role do clinicians play in the design and application of the device?
Yeah, so Ronald, that's a really good question too. So again, kind of with our patients, our physicians are on the ground as well, and some of them, based on their experience, can certainly provide useful feedback on the device for potential updates as well. So them and our our other personnel at clinical sites are really also helpful with that as well. So you're absolutely right that they do play an important role in that also.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Aiden, would you like to ask your next question?
Yeah, I'm back again with another question about
it's okay. Yeah.
I was curious about the high frequency pattern, and is it applicable to spinal cord stimulation? Because this would open up a whole new market, especially with individuals that struggle with lower back pain, because those are spinal nerves, I assume, that affect those. And I don't think you can fit a cuff around them.
Right. So, being able to block in the periphery is different than the spine. And to a previous question, as far as I'm aware, spinal cord stim is more of a stimulation in the spine, right? So what it does is that pain can still be felt, and people can still get relief, but it's more of a masking kind of sensation. And so it's more unknown, if you were to say, to block in the spine, because as has been discussed, when you block a nerve, because when you block a nerve, you can block sensory and you can block motor. So it's possible, right? So in the periphery, it's a much more isolated and more focused area to look at. But that would be something that would probably take a little bit more on the development side at some point to be able to block in the spinal cord, for sure. But in these cases as well, Aiden, to think about it, if patients are also having pain in any periphery area, technology such as like this would tend to take a look at, more localized in the actual area as opposed to up in the spine. So I hope that answers it for you.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome.
I think we just have time for one more question. So to wrap it up, what skills do you wish more incoming employees or managers or engineers in general had that you feel we can develop in this time? Yeah,
I think I've probably said them more often than not, but I really look for people that have that passion, a passion for excellence, right? That just want to work hard and want to do a really good job. I tend to think as a manager myself, I tend to think that if you have a certain level of background, but you have that desire to be better, I can train you to get there. I can help you get there. And again, that's a really great thing about Neuros, is that we're very inclusive like that, and we want to help people grow and succeed. So having that passion, right? Passion for excellence, attention to detail, having that belief in yourself, a willingness to learn is really critical. But obviously, having any kind of skill set that can help is obviously important, but really just those intangibles are really what I would say have been really important in my career, and that are important for anybody. It doesn't, just because you come out of CASE with a biomedical engineering degree doesn't mean you couldn't find yourself on a clinical research team.
Right.
Doesn't mean you couldn't find yourself doing marketing work. It's all about trying to make those connections, right? And being able to network and being able to capitalize on your desire and your passion for the job that you're looking at, and really just, your own growth as as in your career. So hope that answers it.
Yeah, awesome. So we can all look towards our passion to help guide us as we continue to equip ourselves analytically.
Absolutely.
And with that, I'd like to toss it back to Michael to close us out.
Right. Thanks, Jamila. And thanks, Matt. I private chatted Jamila during the session that I thought she did a much better job than Chris Wallace did last night. And again, Matt, you weren't interrupting her.
Right.
Or the people asking questions.
Right.
Thanks so much for doing this. I think, what we find in our series and engaging with alums like yourself, Matt, who are willing to share, and, I think hitting on themes like networking and career path. And I know a number of the folks who joined today are kind of in our BME family of students or grad students or professors and other folks that joined. And I think, whether you're interested in biomedical engineering or pursuing another, field of study or career, I think there were a lot of really interesting things that we covered today that are applicable to a number of folks. So Matt, thank you for joining us. Thanks for everything you do for students and kind of paying back a lot of the mentoring that you got from folks like Colin and others to some of our younger students is really.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity, Michael. I appreciate it.